to make sure that everybody can hear me. There are 3 topics for today's presentation. First, we're going to review government structure. So how does government organize itself to make decisions? The second is how does government create policy? So how does it determine what rules and regulations it's going to put in place? And then what can you do as an individual to influence that process? So it's going to be a quick and easy presentation on those 3 things. I want to begin by saying that government is an extraordinarily complex mechanism that includes a number of inputs, a number of outputs, and the decision-making process is very broad. And but we're not going to talk about all the things. We're going to try to distill this down into the simplest possible form. But I just want to tell you that this is a very, being in a civilized, industrialized, democratic society, we have a very complex system of government. But we're going to focus just on the main structures that form the decision-making process here in Canada. As you all know, Canada is a federated country, so we have a number of different jurisdictions across the country. We're going to focus in on 2 today, the provincial jurisdictions, which are the provinces across Canada, and the federal jurisdiction. In total, we have 14 jurisdictions, so 13 provinces and territories and 1 federal or national government. So to begin with, I want to focus briefly on provincial legislatures. These are the bodies of government that represent the provinces across Canada. So I heard on the beginning of the call, we have a number of people from the West and here in Ontario, so your provincial government is what we're talking about. Within that, we've got provincial members of parliament. Those are folks that you elect usually about every 4 years who are in charge of provincial issues in your province. They're led by the Premier, who is the person who is the leader of the party which has the most seats in your provincial legislature. They also have a Minister of Health who's responsible for health policy within each province. And then the ministry. So they are supported by an office of bureaucrats that can be quite large who set policy, provide support to the hospitals in your jurisdiction, your province, and set local rules. Now, where we see some difference between what the provinces do and the federal government, I want to briefly talk about that. Provinces are responsible for setting healthcare policy within their jurisdictions as it relates to the delivery of care. So they will provide direct funding to hospitals, to community access centers, if you have those in your province, to other health-related institutions that provide direct care to patients. That is their responsibility. They not only provide the funding to make sure that that happens, they also set the policies that regulate the delivery of those services. We're going to get back to that in a minute when we talk about the federal role. Now, in terms of the federal government, so this is the national government which oversees all of the policy setting across Canada. We have 2 sets of government. We have a Senate, and then we have a House of Commons. Those are the 2 houses of Parliament. The Senate are a traditional group that are appointed by the Prime Minister, and they are represented by regions across Canada. So they don't have ridings in the traditional sense. Rather, they have they're representing a province or a region within a province. We're not going to talk too much about senators today. We're going to focus in on the House of Commons because those are the folks we can elect as Canadians. The House of Commons is organized similar to what the way the province is organized. We have a governing party and we have a group of opposition parties. So currently in Canada, we are governed by the Liberal Party, and we have a number of opposition parties, which includes the Conservative Party, the Democratic Party, and Party. I'm only going to focus on the government party today. And as you all probably know, we have a Prime Minister who's responsible for leading the government. In this case, it's Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is supported by a cabinet, which are other elected representatives who he or she will appoint, and they each have portfolios. So in terms of health, it's Minister Petitpas-Taylor, who provides Minister of Health support. And then there are a bunch of other ministers. We have a Minister of Finance, we have a Minister of National Defense, and each one has its own portfolio area of policy responsibility. And again, just like in the provinces, they are supported by departments. So in this case, the Health Canada is the Minister of Health Department. They set national health policy, which is a little different than what happens in the province. National health policy will determine the base standards for the delivery of care, which is governed by the Canada Health Act. And that's our basic, I think it's 5 principles which state how healthcare should be delivered, what sort of very general standards provinces should be abiding by. It also outlines a framework for the distribution of resources to provinces. So the federal government will commit to paying a certain portion of healthcare dollars to each province in order to support the delivery of care. What they do not do is provide specific policy or legislation that would impact the delivery of care on the ground. So the Health Canada looks at sort of the national scope. Another component that supports the department, in particular Health Canada, are agencies. And I'm raising this because the Canadian Patient Safety Institute is an agency of Health Canada. And our role, as it relates to Health Canada, is to provide policy support to the government and to enable the government to fulfill some of its mandates through an arm's length organization, which is what we do. So we provide a policy arm for the government, and in our case, we focus specifically on providing the Government of Canada's patient safety mandate. We work with provinces to make that happen. So how does government make decisions? We've got all these different levels and all these different people involved with it. Well, in terms of what happens on Parliament, it's quite simple. We have the Prime Minister and her cabinet who are responsible for making general policy. Within cabinet, there are a number of committees that look at different policy issues across the country. And collectively, they rely on their department. So the cabinet will give direction to its ministers, and then those ministers will then, in turn, give direction to the departments. So, for example, the Prime Minister might say that we're going to make cannabis, we're going to decriminalize cannabis across Canada. The cabinet will determine what impact that might have in each of their departments. So justice will take a look at it, what laws need to be changed. Public security will look at it and say, how do we police this? Health Canada will look at it and say, what are the health policy implications of this? And each of those respective departments will go back to their minister and say, well, what needs to happen in order to put this new policy in place? They'll also talk to Finance Canada to ensure that they have budget in order to implement all of those changes the Prime Minister has asked for. So from the highest level, that's sort of how policy is developed in Canada. So I just want to go quickly through. I've talked about policy, but I haven't really explained what policy is. It may seem like a straightforward thing, but I just want to touch on it briefly so we all have an understanding of what policy means. Again, I'm using one of these types of diagrams to explain policy is an extraordinarily complex thing. Many inputs, many outputs, many stakeholders are involved, and it can be quite a complex endeavor. But I'm not going to focus too much on all of this stuff. I'm going to try to boil this down to as simple as possible. And I'm going to begin with a definition of policy from the dictionary. Policy in this case is a set of rules that govern the way that government behaves and the way that it expects its citizens to behave in turn. So policy can be a law, or it can be a guiding principle around the economics of the country. It essentially sets forth a direction that the government wants to take. How is policy made? What is it specifically the act of making policy? Well, it can, again, come from different places, but principally what we're talking about, policy is a law, be it a federal or provincial, a piece of legislation that dictates what the government intends to do and how it hopes to achieve that. So it can be a specific law around, for example, the cannabis example. It could be a law about drinking and driving, or it could be a law around the distribution of funds or resources across the country. Laws are typically supported by regulation. Those are internal department rules that are used to support the law. So earlier we heard about labeling for medications. Well, Health Canada is looking at a number of regulations around how companies should structure their labels that are put on medications. That type of work can't really be achieved through a law, but regulations are usually used to try to encourage industry to behave in a certain way. And then the last thing is department guidance. So departments, in particular Health Canada, will have a set of rules that it uses to determine how it's going to enact in policy. There are lots of department guidance around patient safety. Health Canada will adopt certain policy objectives, and then it will employ different guidance measures in order to make sure that those policy objectives are achieved. Each of these different sort of ways of creating policy flow into one another. So you will have a law, regulations to support that law, and then department guidance, which again supports the regulations. Each one is a different tier of impact. How does it get, so we've got these laws and regulations and department measures. How do we actually implement those? Well, again, there's several ways. First, the Prime Minister will write the Minister of Health, or the Premier will write the Provincial Minister of Health a letter at the beginning of their term that says, as Prime Minister, I'm asking you to make these issues a priority for your department. Federal budgets or provincial budgets also set mandates. So every year there's a big hullabaloo, especially here in Ottawa, around what the budget looks like. Well, governments will set policies through the budgets, through the distributions of funds that will support different initiatives that it wants to undertake. And every year, governments, just like business, set their plans and priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. And within that, there will also be implementation measures for certain policies that the minister has set forth. For us at CPSI, those are always important for us too, because that's usually where we see the work that we're undertaking reflected in the plans and priorities for Health Canada. So as advocates, how do you influence this process? I hope I've done my best to explain this. Fairly simple, although you know, from the surface it looks simple. Again, it can be a bit complicated, but as an advocate and as a Canadian citizen, you not only have a right, but I would argue a responsibility to try to influence the process to ensure that patient safety gets the attention that it deserves. I'm just going to go through some quick tips on how we can do that. First, I want to answer the question of why do this in the first place? Who cares? Why do we need to advocate? Well, when I first came on to CPSI, I explained to our CEO that I think that hiring somebody who has experience in government relations is a good opportunity for the organization, but to be honest, I don't have any personal experience when it comes to patient safety. I've got kids and parents that have been in hospital, but I've been very fortunate in terms of my personal experience. But you really need to have, in order to make a difference, people who have lived experience, understand the healthcare system better than I do, and who are able to tell a compelling story around their experience with patient safety. Myself, as just a guy in a suit running around in Ottawa trying to meet with people, can have an impact. But if you want to have real impact, you need to have real people telling real stories. And I think that is what I would say to anybody who's wanting to be an advocate for patient safety. In terms of what it is, being an advocate is really just about educating, telling your story, and using that as a foundation to explain why change is needed. So advocacy is fundamentally an education process. You're educating your members of parliament, people people in government. The other important thing to say is, as an advocate, it's critical not to play into partisan politics. This is something I've tried to do throughout my life. One of the things that's constant here in Ottawa is change. Today we have a Liberal government. Tomorrow, who knows, right? So it's always important to ensure that when you're being an advocate, that you're doing so for an issue that you're passionate about, not a political cause or supporting a political party that you're passionate about. Really keep to the issues would be my biggest advice here. So what are some good strategies in terms of if you want to get involved in advocacy, what do you need to do? First and foremost, begin the process early. The last thing you want to do is decide to be an advocate after a law has already been passed. At that point, you probably are too late. You want to speak up, and you want to speak up early. In order to do that, you have to do your homework. So listen to your colleagues, listen to your friends, see what's going on, listen to the news, find out what the government is thinking about. Governments rarely make decisions quick. Almost they never do. And when they do make decisions, they're reasonably good across all jurisdictions of consulting with their constituents, with Canadians. When you hear about those opportunities, I highly recommend getting engaged. Find out what they're thinking about, and they want to hear from you. The third piece of advice would be to think local. Remember, your local member of parliament is paid by you to hear your voice and listen to you and take that to Ottawa when they're here in the capital. Your most important advocate, either provincial or federal, is your local member of provincial or federal legislature. Fourth tip would be build established relationships. It is incredibly difficult to be a lone wolf advocate. You have a lot of work ahead of you if you want to take that approach. I would really encourage Patient Canada to work as a group to really take your collective and united voices to Parliament and make sure that either provincially or federally that you're being heard of as a group, because you will be listened to if you're seen as being a large number of people. And the fifth and final piece is know what you want and be very clear and crisp about it. When you're going and asking for change and you want to impact policy, be sure to be clear in your message and to be clear in your desired outcome. If you go into Parliament and say, well, I'd kind of like this to happen, or I think this is a problem, but I don't know how to fix it, it will be very difficult, and having been on the other end, I know this, it's very difficult to figure out a solution. What you want to hear from somebody is to say, you know, I've personally experienced this problem, and here's why this is important to me, and here's what I think you can do to fix it. That's the correct type of approach to take. And you can do that knowing what your key messages are going to be. I want to quickly talk about some of the tactics that I've used and I would encourage others to use when talking to elected officials. First and foremost is write your member of parliament. And by write, I mean write. The more old-fashioned, forgive me for saying that way of doing it, the better. What I would strongly avoid doing is writing an email. Having worked in an MP's office, I can tell you, and this is by no means an exaggeration, thousands of emails a day. The most effective, by far the most effective way of communicating with your member of parliament is a handwritten letter, you know, self-addressed envelope to an MP. Those make it directly to them every single time, and they are usually responded to rather quickly. It's the easiest way to cut through all of the communication chatter that happens within an MP's office. The second thing is ask for a meeting face-to-face. They want to hear from you. They understand that they were elected by their constituents and they want to hear from them. So pick up the phone, ask for a meeting would be my second piece of advice. Third, attend a town hall. MPs quite often will hold, and it's true of federal and provincial, meet and greets within their riding. They might do a breakfast in the morning. They might do something in the evening with their constituents. Hopefully, most don't do it a week before the election. They'll do it throughout their term as an elected official. But go to those meetings, attend them, and meet them face-to-face and say, hey, look, I'd really like to meet with you. I have something important to talk about. Fourth piece would be use social media. Almost all elected officials are all over social media. They understand the power of that as a communications tool, so I would encourage you to contact them through social media. Also, if you've met with your MP, ask to take a photo, post it to social media. You're now their best friend, right? So that's another tactic that you might want to employ when it comes to social media. And then the fifth one is to participate in the policy process. I mentioned earlier in this conversation that governments quite often reach out and ask for input into some of the decisions they're making. Some of you may have heard or may be aware that the government has created a new advisory council on pharmacare. That advisory council is being led by a former Minister of Health from here in Ontario, and he's traveling the country, speaking to Canadians, holding town halls, meeting with them personally, to find out how pharmacare might impact them as an individual. Participate in that process. Write in, say, hey, look, this is why I think pharmacare might improve patient safety. Those are tactics that are also successful, too, when it comes to trying to influence government. And I'm going to lead on some tips quickly. Now, I've touched on this a little bit, but be concise. It's really important to deliver your message in a short way, you know, the old elevator speech, and make sure that they know exactly what it is you're asking for. And don't be shy to ask and tell them what you want. The second to be relevant. As much as it's important to talk about your personal experience and your story, make sure that they understand how that relates to the ask you put forward. The other thing is as important is to know your facts. So know some important details around the policy measure that you're trying to change and what sort of information might be helpful to make your case. And then the last, I've said this too, be proactive, ask for your support. Every 4 years, a member of parliament will come out and ask for your support in order for them to be elected. Don't be shy about asking them to support your cause. I would really encourage that and to ask them to commit. I think it's really important to end every meeting with, I hope you've understood what we've talked about today. This is why this is important to me, and I hope I can have your support going forward, and encourage them to acknowledge that request, to ask them to say yes, I will support you, next time this issue is raised. So I'm hoping that gave everybody a quick overview of how to influence government, and I hope I've left enough time for question and answer. But before I do, I just want to talk about some of the things that are ongoing right now. And Brian, feel free to jump in, because I know that the Government Relations Committee has been part of some of this work. One of the first things I want to touch on is an issue survey that was recently launched today. The Government Relations Committee is exploring what issues should be a priority when communicating with government. So we've developed a survey that hopefully will give us just some general information around what you think should be an important issue when speaking with government. And we've left lots of space for people to put in their own answers, and at this time, feel free to go in and prioritize the issues as they're listed there. If you have any questions, give me a shout, and I can walk you through the survey, or we can talk offline about what you think is really important. The second thing I want to let you know, and Brian touched on these as well, are some opportunities that are coming up. If you want to be an advocate, I've got lots of opportunities for you. As Brian mentioned, during Canadian Patient Safety Week, we are holding a Hill Day in Ottawa, so that's a 2-day event. We're hoping that we can get 12 patients, advocates to come to Ottawa to meet with members of Parliament and speak with them one-on-one about medication safety. And if you come, we'll do our best to organize a meeting with your MP as well as with other MPs who are responsible for setting healthcare policy over those 2 days. The second opportunity is, sorry, I mentioned last one. The other opportunity is an e-petition. So I've highlighted before, and I think we've even heard earlier in the conversation, that the government is looking at changing the regulations around the labeling of medications in Canada. They want to make it standardized. We're developing a petition that will be shared on the floor of the House of Commons. When that petition is formally introduced in the House, I'll let Brian know, and we're hoping that we can get as many Canadians as possible to sign up in support of that petition. Signing an e-petition is very simple. You just have to go to your website, put your name in. I believe you have to put your address in too. It might be your postal code, and you've signed it. And the more signatures we get, the better. That means we get some more attention around this e-petition. And secondly, the government has to, if we get enough petitions, the government has to respond to the petition. So we're really hoping we can make that threshold. I'll leave it at that. And if anybody has any questions for me, I'm here for as long as you need me.
This is Linda. I was just wondering, there's some of us who are already on the Government Relations Committee and have seen this once already. I'd be really interested in those people who, this is your first time seeing this. What is it helpful? Let me see, Melissa, Kim, Eileen, Annette, Angie, Asha.
Sorry, are you asking for feedback on the presentation?
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was very informative, and it's really interesting, excuse me, to see all of the different pieces that have to come together to get these changes made, and to know that as patients we have such an important part is incredible, and it really goes to show how powerful our voices are. I also really appreciate the tips that you gave, Eric, because I've advocated with my local members to get changes made here in Ontario is medication error reporting. So those tips are really helpful and useful, and I got guidance from my local MPP on how to create those letters and how to reach the right people. So I thought that was really an excellent and well put together presentation. So thank you, Eric. And Eric, could you just say when that Hill Day is again?
Sure, yeah, it's during Canadian Patient Safety Week, and it's the Monday, Tuesday, which is October, oh goodness, 29th and 30th. Thank you, Brian. 29th and 30th in Ottawa.
Great, thank you.
You can come. Yeah. And just so everybody knows that Hill Day, we're going to be, the key messages will be in and around medication safety.
It's Kim, and I'll just comment. Thank you very much for your presentation, Eric. It was excellent, and I've had an opportunity to present to government with Eric's help, and I think that we are just so fortunate to be able to be doing this, because I think we can do a lot of advocacy work in different venues, but when it comes right down to it, presenting to our provincial government, to our federal government, really the buck stops there, right? And so it's just very, very powerful, I think, the way that we can potentially sway healthcare in a positive way for patients and families. And I think as well that Eric's point about the messaging and the way that it's delivered, I don't think that that can be overemphasized. I think that we really need to give a lot of thought to that message, how other people help you so that it really drives it home clearly. It might be clear in our minds, but it's not necessarily as transparent to them. So the audience around the table that comes from a whole variety of backgrounds. So thank you very much, Eric, for that.
Oh, thank you. And I have to acknowledge the effort that Kim put into traveling to Ottawa to meet with the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health when they were reviewing antimicrobial resistance, and the not only your personal story that you brought to the committee, but also the expertise that you lent was wonderful. And I think, not to get too off topic, but it sort of is on topic, and that is to say, one of the big takeaways from that experience was that I think most members of Parliament have little exposure to patient safety as a concern. And it really struck me just how they were not as aware as I would have hoped around some of the more obvious issues relating to patient safety. So I think the need to advocate, to raise the issue with as many parliamentarians as possible is really critical. And that we should really be taking every advantage of every opportunity we can, because when it comes to advocating for patient safety, there are lots of voices out there talking about different healthcare issues. Unfortunately, there aren't as many as we need talking about patient safety as an issue.
Are there any other comments for Eric?
This is Isha, Linda. I just wanted to find out, first of all, very, very informative presentation. Thank you, Eric. And what about issues that cross-cut within the federal and the provincial department or units? Do you then go to both your MP and the MLA with the same project or same idea?
Thank you, Isha. That's a great question, and I'm glad you raised it. And the simple answer is yes. And I think in particular, when talking about healthcare, rarely is there an issue that is exclusive to either federal or provincial, unless it's something very local. So I would encourage everybody on this call, if you're wanting to press for a patient safety issue, to meet with both your federal representative and your provincial representative as a start. And I think that telling a similar story to both when it comes to patient safety is is fair and probably strongly encouraged, because rarely is there an issue that is exclusive to one jurisdiction when we're talking about healthcare.
Thank you.
And sorry, I don't want to drag out. The other thing is too, quite often a federal representative will be in touch or communicate with the provincial counterpart. And so if you meet with both, you have a good opportunity. At some point, they will also collaborate. So the more people, I said before about building communities, the more people who are aware of your story, the better.
Great. Thanks.
It's Linda. I'm aware of the time and we're continue or not. Can we, Iwana? Janet?
Linda, you were cutting off just a little bit. I didn't hear the question.
It's 6 o'clock. Can we continue for a while, or do we have to cut off?
Sure, we can.
All right. Okay.
Onward.
Well, maybe at this point I will move on in the agenda, but I do want to thank so much Brian Pinner, who's been the chair of this committee. But for all the work, Brian, you've done a fantastic job leading the rest of us who are on the Government Relations Committee, and to all of those members who are on the Government Relations Committee. Because not only have they developed this with Eric, and Eric primarily did the webinar today, but also there's been extensive work on the guide, which was also sent out today. And that has taken a lot of work. And we'd sure like your feedback on that guide. So if you've got some feedback on it, please get back to us, and of course, we'll send it out to all the rest of our members who aren't on the call today as well. One other question I just had, would it be good to repeat this as a webinar? Would you think that would be useful for more members to be able to see this at some point?
I think it would be good. That way people can then view it, you know, when they have more time and stuff, so that more can see it. I think it would be a great idea.
Okay.
Brian and Linda, actually, I asked Janet to record the webinar, and you probably heard the little voice saying the webinar is being recorded. That's the thought I had. So if everybody can give us permission, then we can share the link to the recording with the notes from the meeting with all members.
You have my permission.
Is there anybody that doesn't have permission? All right, I think you've got everybody. If you do not want to give your permission, please let Iwana know via email. Is that okay, Iwana?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, terrific. Once again, thank you, Eric, and please stay on if you'd like to hear the rest of the meeting, if you'd like. I'm sure it's edifying for you. So is it okay if we move on then with everybody?
Yeah, I see some people have to leave, so we'll just say goodbye to them.
Oh, okay. All right. Eileen, are you good to stay?
I can stay, yes.
Okay. Okay. Then let's go on to reports, and I'm going to start with the co-chair report, and I'll try to make it really brief. I think probably most of you know that Terry Savo has resigned due to personal reasons as a co-chair. And just so you know, we currently have a member who maybe is potentially interested. I'm going to become a co-chair, and I'm going to be talking with her sometime this week. So I will keep you updated on that. And as well, though, I just wanted to say if there are others on the call who are interested in the co-chair position, to please contact me. Secondly, just in relation to down there, the collaboration with other patient groups, which I'll be reporting on, I may do that right now. We've talked to about 10 or 11 different groups, all of whom are who have sort of patient safety and quality as a priority. And so based on their feedback, and it seems like there's a lot of interest in working together with us. So first of all, that point, and secondly, the fact that we have had the federal review of the 8 Canadian or federal health agencies, which included CPSI, and there are some recommendations being made to federal government. Anyway, we just thought it might be helpful, some of us who've been talking about this, Sharon Nettleton is one of them, and Micah and Judy, who were our representatives on the strategic planning for CPSI. And we thought that it would be good to put together a strategic for the future for our organization. And I'll be sending you a letter out on this in a few days to all of our members, but I just wanted to highlight to those of you who are on the call tonight that we will be asking for people who might be interested in helping us on this committee. So stay tuned. And finally, the one other thing is down later on the agenda, but I'm just going to mention it right now. And Eric mentioned how important social media is. So I am putting out a call to members to see if there is an interest in us having a Patients for Patient Safety Canada Facebook page, public Facebook page, public Twitter, and public Instagram. And so we'll be looking to see if we have members who might be interested in helping us with that, and that information will come out to all of our members shortly as well. So that's my report in a nutshell. Any questions?
No questions here.
Okay, good.
No.
If you think of them, you can always bring them up. So I want to move on then to the committees, and Eileen is on the line. Eileen, would you like to do an update on membership committee?
Sure, I'll do a condensed version. I appreciate people are running out of time. So our membership committee, we met last on August 15th. So thanks, Iwana, for taking the minutes to that meeting. I think overall, over the summer, there are a lot of moving parts, and as I mentioned, the committee, we're just trying to get our house in order, and that includes our terms of reference membership. And I just want to thank, although Terry, I know she had to resign as co-chair, but she and Linda have both really helped out a lot with Iwana and Janet to actually go through our existing membership to see those members who are still active or still interested on staying on and, you know, due to personal other reasons cannot stay on. So that was a humongous amount of work this past spring and summer, so thank you. I also want to thank Marianne Murray and Judy Birdswell. I know Marianne's going to stay on until we recruit more members to our membership group. But Judy, I know she's done a lot of years on this, and so she's resigned from the group itself. So what we're doing is welcomed Robin McGee, who will help us, and there are a couple of roles that we, at the last meeting, just rejigged and revised and updated. One of them is the orientation coordinator role, which Robin has agreed to take on. And the other role we're looking at is the observer role description. So if you need more information after this meeting, please let us know. In terms of our documentation, certainly looking at the website, taking on from our last September in-person meeting in Toronto, we are looking at the website, anything affiliated with application forms, the interview form itself, which is under my task to do, and basically our membership process has remained unchanged. We do have a roster or action register full of many items that we need to review. So once we go through that, and I'll be presenting, I still haven't done that, send it to Janet just to have it look at least presentable. We'll hopefully have those drafts ready as soon as we can. I think that's really it right now. There are still a couple of members due to personal reasons. They cannot be as active on the membership group, but they haven't resigned from it. So I'm just going to give another couple of weeks to see where we're at, and certainly extending out the invitation. I know that Linda has as well before. If anyone is interested, you know, please let us know. Okay, so I think that's it. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Eileen, and thank you.
Okay.
It's a big job, and thank you so much for doing it on our behalf.
Thank you.
All right. I don't think Donna Davis is on the line for participation request. Did you want to say anything?
No, as you heard from the introduction and the roundtable updates from our members, the summer was quite a busy one. We managed several requests from multiple levels, from speaking engagements that were one-time to letters to Health Canada to support legislation and policies. lots of committees and working groups. So I would just say a big thank you on behalf of the Participation Requests Committee to every single one of you for carrying our collective voice forward and making care safer for all Canadians.
All right. How about knowledge transfer? Do we have any report from Teresa? No?
Teresa is not on the line. Maybe I'll say a few words about this. The knowledge transfer group has facilitated a webinar recently. It was one of the very well-attended webinars. So we sent the recording and proceedings to all of you by email right after the webinar. And right now we are just waiting to hear from the World Health Organization to begin to plan 3 webinars on medication safety, 3, each of them tackling a priority area that the Medication Without Harm Global Campaign has put the focus on. So stay tuned for that. We'll let you know when we are ready to proceed with those webinars.
Okay, thank you. I mentioned already the collaboration with other patient groups. Brian, did you have anything more in government relations?
Not anything more to add, just regarding the Hill Day for October 29th and 30th. I just want to reiterate the importance. We want to hear from our members as soon as possible so we can get 12 people together to make arrangements for Hill Day. So if you can let us know by September 10th if you're willing to participate in Hill Day, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
And so I'm just going to say Awana and Janet will be sending out that request out to all our members, right? Via email? Okay, terrific. It'll have to go out soon, I guess. All right, Awana, patient stories for Shift to Safety.
Yeah, just a quick note here that since we don't have an internal mechanism for our members to share their stories, we worked with the CPSI program called Shift to Safety, where there is a blog where patient stories can be featured. So we invite every one of you who wants to write a story to email us to let us know. The story is yours. All the content is yours. We will not tell you what to write. And we will provide you with coaching and support for how to structure the story. So just let us know, and we will help you with that. In an initial request, we put a link to Michelle Lindsay's story just as an example of how your blog could look like. So again, just let us know, and we are here to help you spread the word.
All right. Item 6, I think I'll ask if we can just forego that since we're over time today. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
All right. And just I want to draw your attention to the meeting dates at the bottom of this agenda. So our next one will be November 6th at 10 in the morning Mountain, noon Eastern. So we're trying some different times to see if we can hit more people being able to join. And then you can see the other dates there as well. So I think we'll call it a day or call it an evening, whatever it is where you are. And thank you so much to everybody for your participation today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.